Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mer Herosner podcast, episode 7. I'm your host, Vic and as always, I'm joined by my handsome, noble co-host, Mike Balyan, where we dive into our great Armenian history and discuss different eras, kingdoms, topics, and great people. Why are you looking at me like that?
I appreciate the different adjective as opposed to last week.
Oh, well, hey, trying to get you married.
Oh, God. Really?
Hey,
Is that what that's all about?
Yep. By the time we're done with this, by the time we end this podcast for good, I don't know when that's going to be because we have a lot of history to cover. I'm going to get your ass married.
Wow.
Yeah. So, how are you today, Mike John?
A little overwhelmed with your statements and your adjectives.
Well, if
2 weeks in a
if
row.
you think about it, the Mike John actually, according to Stepan Partamyan, and I don't mean to name drop, but according to him, it's like a term of endearment in Persian. And
really?
Armenians everywhere around. I mean, that's the first thing. We talk to each other like that. Mike John, Vic John, this, everything. It's always John, right? But the funny thing is, he says we should use the word hokies. So, you want to try this again?
I don't know. You want to start from the beginning?
No, I can just say, how are you today, hokies?
Shat lavem agam.
Huh?
Hold on. Mirope. Lavem achberes.
Aha, lava. Genatset kyankas.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. There we go. All right. So, a couple of things we want to mention before we dive into our main topic. One thing is I want to mention another podcast, which is the Wise Nuts. If you guys don't know about them, please go ahead and search for them. It's Wise Nuts. They're good friends of ours who have been doing this way longer than us. Their podcast is just 3 guys who talk about current events. They
cover all sorts of topics.
They have amazing guests. They cover from political to science to, everything you can think of. And I know in the near future, hopefully very soon, we've talked about this with them. We're going to do almost a crossover episode where we'll be guests on each other's shows. Great guys. So they're on all major platforms. They actually, their podcast is live on Monday nights, and you can find them on YouTube. So just if you go on YouTube and search for Wise Nuts, give them a follow, subscribe, and every Monday 7:30 they are live. And if you don't, go ahead.
7:30 LA Standard
Pacific
time.
Time.
So if you guys can figure that out with your time differences for our international audience,
I keep forgetting we're worldwide. So,
yes.
But give them a follow. If not, you can search them on every major platform from, Spotify to Apple to Overcast, any of those. And you can just, the episode is live the next day. That's one thing. The other major announcement we want to do is our 3rd sculpture will be actually released tomorrow for pre-orders. And I know a lot of people have asking what it is, and we've given hints of, that it's a female, this and that. But Mike, you want to do the honors?
A woman.
It's a woman. It's a woman.
It is a woman.
Beautiful woman.
Yeah, beautiful woman. It is Queen Ashrae.
Okay.
It is Queen Ashrae, who was the wife of Tartad III, Tartad Yerotikiner.
Yeah.
And she was basically the first Christian queen.
Yes.
During our conversion, our Armenian civilization conversion and acceptance of Christianity.
Yeah.
Which is what we're going to discuss.
Yes, exactly.
Tonight.
We're going to talk a brief, this is our main topic, just to let you know today, is going to be a brief overview of impacts of Christianity, which we're going to kind of dive into the culture, architecture, and both the negative and positive impacts that it has on our entire nation, our history. So we're
leading into the present day.
Yeah, we're gonna be basically covering the whole 301 AD, but we're gonna cover major points of it, because it's so long, it's impossible to fit that into a podcast. The other, we got to announce our winner. of the
Oh,
T-shirt
yeah,
and thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Who won the goods? Who won the goods?
Yeah. So the winner is Harag Yasedjian from Van Nuys, California. Harag, congratulations! You are the winner of a T-shirt and a mug of Tigran the Great. We will, we'll reach out to you and get your address to get that shipped out. So again, congratulations! Thank you everyone who actually, submitted your info. We appreciate it. Thank you for all the subscriptions, the follows, the likes, and just overall the feedback. So I think we're gonna have another giveaway coming up soon, and
we just want to give stuff away to people, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
I'm fine. Yeah. I mean, who cares?
Whatever.
We'll just give things away. We love our subscribers. We love our followers.
We love people.
Yes, all types of people. So, and I want to thank everybody who keeps listening to us and following us. I mean, the feedback is amazing, guys. I mean, every day our subscription, it's almost like an addiction for me. I keep checking every day. The numbers keep growing and growing and growing. And I'm like, it's like, I don't know, like I got to stop. But thank you so much. We're over 1,500 subscribers right now. So again, thank you. So having said that, again, as I mentioned, our main topic is 301 AD, and
for the non-Armenian audience, because I know the Armenians know about all this, the non-Armenian audience, which I know there are a few. I have a few friends who are non-Armenians that listen to this stuff. It is the year we basically officially accepted as the first state in the world history, as the first state to accept Christianity.
Yes,
as a nation state.
So to begin, we want to kind of, we have topics that we've kind of researched, and we just want to, we're going to go through them in order, obviously. So the first topic, I think one of the major topics is to talk about the founding apostles, So now something to mention, which is very important. In 2001, Armenia celebrated the 1700th anniversary of Christianity as the official religion of the state. So in 301 AD, Tertad III and the first Catholicos, Saint Gregory the Illuminator, in Armenian, we know him as Grigor Lusavoric, ordered and spread Christianity through the region, making it the first Christian nation. The Church of Armenia, or the Holy Apostolic Church, was named after the two founding apostles of Christ, Saint Thaddeus and Saint Bartholomew, which established the first denomination of Christianity in Greater Armenia in the 1st century AD. This was ongoing mission for nearly 2 centuries before it became official. Now, the two apostles were later put to death by King Sanatruk, who defended Mithraism, which originated in Armenia and later was spread throughout the Roman Empire.
Now, King Sanatruk was a member of the Arsacid dynasty of Armenia. He succeeded King Tertad I, who was king of Armenia in the first century. He was also king of Orsoini, and he reigned from 91 AD to 109 AD, which was a historic kingdom located in Mesopotamia, like the northern part of Mesopotamia. We will cover him since he's kind of he's part of that era before Christianity in the 1st century. I'm sure we're going to cover him at some point to some extent, not like a full episode on him, but we'll cover him because he was associated with a lot of what was going on prior to 301 AD.
Yeah.
Also, Mithraism was a religion, a sort of like mystery religion. I don't know. There wasn't much information in terms of what they believed in, except it's centered around the god of Mithras. The practice of Mithras worship was characterized by images of the god slaughtering a bull. Sounds pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But you can literally find many, many images. I'm sure you guys have probably even seen it, and it's not. I mean, I've seen images like this on reliefs of sculptures and whatnot, or walls or whatnot, but I didn't know that's what it was about. Interesting to find this out. It seemed like this practice didn't last very long. It had a pretty short lifespan and lasted until the 4th century AD, so about like 3 centuries pretty much. And it was pretty widespread with the Romans and and some of the Armenians that were outside of Greater Armenia.
3 centuries, that's 300 years. So
Yeah,
it's
but
still
I mean,
a long time.
But I mean, in terms of what's lasted, what we know
course,
about now with
course, yeah.
Islam, with Hinduism, with
Yeah.
you know, with Christianity, right? Like it didn't really last that long.
Now, during the 1st through the 3rd centuries, the Christians were persecuted by the Arsacid kings throughout the kingdom. Sanatruk's attempts at abolishing Christianity was no avail, and neither was his successor. Christianity spread far and wide among the masses, especially with the less fortunate people in lower classes. There were even some aristocrats who converted to Christianity before it was accepted in the region. Most notable, the sister of King Sanatruk.
Isn't that interesting?
It is
Right.
going against the brother.
And again, movie scenes. We've seen this in like movies, like where you know someone
Yeah.
from the family goes against a typical practice, whatever the case is.
You know,
Quite
people are
interesting.
going to think we do nothing but watch movies.
Hey, listen, you know, it gives a good visual reference to what we're talking about. You know, I'm
Yeah, I
sure
know.
it'll spark the same thing in other people's minds.
Yeah, we got to start
Maybe.
getting cameras in here.
Anyway,
So now we kind of want to talk about the establishment of Christianity
Yeah.
and how it kind of came into form.
started to develop
Yeah.
after, you know.
Yeah.
So Christianity had begun its movement, right? And it started to spread in the ancient world. However, it was practiced secretly because of the persecution that you were talking about. Like they were heavily persecuted with the Roman Empire. They were heavily persecuted with anybody, even their own kind. Even the Armenians were.
Of course.
You know, it was like, okay, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
You know, they believed in Mithraism, and we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
Zoroastrianism, which was what the Persians were all about, and they, you know, these people had to, even you know, if any of our listeners who have read the Bible or know the story of biblical story, you know, people were kind of practicing in secrecy. Right, because the Jews were persecuting him and the Romans were persecuting him and whatnot. Right, so it kind of carried over for a few centuries.
Yeah,
and so it was until 301 AD it was practiced secretly when Saint Gregory the Illuminator, Grigoriou Savoric, took it upon himself to convert or attempt to convert Tertad Yerort or Tertad III, Tiridatis, and the royal court, who were fiercely opposed to it. His objective was to convert the upper class, which would help solidify Christianity as the religion of the state. Smart move, because if you have influential individuals,
of course.
right?
Start from the top.
Exactly. King Tertad was so opposed to it that he had Saint Gregory arrested and imprisoned in the dungeon at Khorvirap, which is a monastery near the holy mountain of Ararat. We all have an image of this in our houses, right?
Yeah,
As Armenians?
yeah, definitely.
I mean,
Everybody knows. I mean, you know.
And again, I'm going to keep saying this for anybody that is not an Armenian that listens to this. All you have to do is research it. Khorvirap, Khorvirap, and you'll see beautiful images.
Yeah, yeah.
No doubt. They're gorgeous images.
But that you want to call it a dungeon or whatever it was,
Yeah.
it's so tiny.
Yeah.
And,
I've been down there. Have you been down there?
No, I've never been there, but
Yeah.
I've seen pictures. I've had friends who've attempted to go down there. It's
like when they say 8x8 cell, you know the term 8x8 cell, like a jail cell. It's basically that. And again, these are some details that we're going to leave out, but from what we know about our history, Grigoriou Savoric or Saint Gregory the Illuminator spend, I think, anywhere from 13 to 15 years down there.
It's somewhere along there.
I mean, darkness,
I personally
darkness.
don't think I can go down there. I have a little bit of claustrophobia, so
it's
I
not that
think
bad. It really isn't that bad.
Okay.
I remember as a kid, but it's interesting. Like if you look at the images, there's plenty of images. No secret. I mean, the walls are like black.
Yeah,
it's darkness, complete.
I mean, can you imagine
darkness.
spending 13 years there?
It's brutal. I mean, it's brutal. It's not even 13 hours.
I mean, the mental strength you gotta have to survive that.
Absolutely.
Give it up to Greek. Give it up to Grigoriou Savoric.
Again, this story goes way deeper. We'll discuss this in future episodes. But King Tertad converted after realizing that the conversion to Christianity can be a unifying force, especially against the enemies from the south, the Persians, who practiced, as we mentioned earlier, Zoroastrianism.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second. Saint Gregory became the first supreme patriarch and or Catholicos, Catholicos, of the Holy Apostolic Church. One of the first major tasks, I guess you can call it that, it was to, and I don't know how I feel about this, is to destroy or get rid of the region's rich heathen heritage.
Yeah.
Now, prior to Christianity being accepted, obviously these people practiced something. They believed in something, right? Now, they'd build beautiful temples. They'd build beautiful statues and things like this. He basically wanted to get rid of this. So
here's my thing. I have a big, I don't want to say big, but I have a bit of a problem with this, and I've always debated and argued regarding this situation. For me, and if we go back to episode 1 with Vahan Setyan, the whole thing about Armenian Highlands is about the 18,000 year reach history that we have.
Sure.
Now, before Christianity even was, on the face of earth, there was our history. There was, religions. People throughout history of all civilizations. Everybody had, religion is about faith and believing in the afterlife, that there's something after us being on this world. And what drives me nuts is the fact that they had to go to that extreme to destroy so many important artifacts to push their narrative, which can be compared to what's happening today. And I'm not going to get into it, but it's about pushing the narrative and again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I have a problem with that. That's my biggest thing when as Armenians accepting Christianity. I think that was the wrong move, but going back to him, you got to understand, 13 years pretty much imprisoned in an 8x8 dark room,
and his faith was still strong.
Faith strong, but it could have been also some form of, again, this is all assumption on my end, payback towards the king by saying, okay, well, now you believe, because I think the story is something about him curing
it goes deeper with Tartat.
We'll cover that.
Story goes way deeper as to why he accepted what he accepted. But again, we'll leave that for another episode because it's a pretty complex story.
Yeah, but it could have been almost like, well, now I got you, and you're gonna do what I say. So, but anyways, we're diving too deep into it.
And one thing to add to that is, we've seen it, like you mentioned, we've seen it happen throughout history. The Muslims did it to churches. They turned them into mosques, right? One prime example, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, right? That, or what at the time was known as Constantinopolis or Constantinople, right? That wasn't built by the Muslims.
No.
In fact, one of the architects was an Armenian.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So
that dome that was created.
Almost the whole thing. They added the spires on the side. If you look at it architecturally, the 4 spires that surround each corner was added by the Muslims after the Ottoman Empire took on the area and basically,
of course,
However, we have to understand that, like, these things happened over history. It sucks to think about it. It does, where you basically convert everything that you ravage and pillage into whatever it is. Right? It sucks, but it's just something that's happened throughout history. I'm not saying that I'm accepting it, but this is the way you kind of, I guess, have the influence to convert the masses. Right? So anyway, moving on into some of the major, just 2 examples of some of the major things that went under heavy destruction were the temples of Golden Mother of Anahite, our one of our gods and goddesses, and the supreme god, the Father Aramast.
Which is, oh man, sad.
Well,
but
I could imagine the people at the time. Who knows what they went through, right?
Yeah. But I want to go back and cover Zoroastrianism real quickly. One of the world's oldest practicing religions. They believe that their religion was revealed by their super god called Ahura Mazda, or they, basically if you translate it, it's wise lord, to a priest called Zoroaster, as the Greeks called him. Basically, in a nutshell, Zoroastrianism believes that the world was created by God and that good and evil existed and that good would prevail. They believed in an afterlife based on the choices people made in their lives. Does that sound really familiar?
Yeah, right. Like if anybody knows anything about that, I mean, it almost sounds like the base of what most religions practice.
Yeah. And to also cover, the golden mother of Anahite, who is basically the goddess of fertility and healing, wisdom and water in Armenian mythology. I mean, till this day, we know about her.
She's I mean, with her in terms of our mythology, though, she's a very popular figure amongst,
of course.
I mean, especially amongst females.
Isn't the whole Vartavar thing about
her?
Yeah, she's of course.
It is.
The
Yes, it
Vartavar
is.
that which is in July. Yeah,
Good
the
point.
water.
Good point.
So, the other one major thing that from the destruction, the god, God, the father of Aramazd, chief and creator god in pre-Christian Armenia. Aramazd was regarded as the god of fertility, rain, and abundance, as well as the father other gods, Anahite, Mer, and Nane.
Yeah. So, little interesting tidbit is Aramazd, the god Aramazd, was actually from the time of Urartu, probably even before that. It was kind of like a prominent figure in the region that kind of carried over into this time area and moving forward before Christianity, right? So in 303 AD, St. Gregory helped begin the construction of none other than the Mother Cathedral of the Holy City of Etchmiadzin. This location was interesting, though, as well, as we will find out. The holy ground was selected after St. Gregory had a vision of Jesus Christ, Miadzin, only begotten Son of God, right? Which is what it stands for, descended from the heavens to the very spot of where Etchmiadzin sits today. As I mentioned a bit ago, it was a very interesting site. So the site sits on, I don't know if any of our listeners know, I mean, I've looked into this stuff prior to any of this. The globe sits on or has these certain vertex points where apparently it attracts more energy or whatever the case is. This isn't some sort of conspiracy theory. It's an actual thing.
No, of course,
With the Earth's electromagnetic fields and whatnot.
It was very well thought out when they built it.
Which is interesting because back then, these people must have known so much about the way the Earth worked. Right? I mean,
astrology, I think, as well.
And we think to ourselves that we have all this technology and blah, 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 blah. And we know all. No, these people, this is all they did. They never looked at their phones. There were no phones. They never looked at anything.
Their rock phones?
Their rock phones. Their cuneiform tablets. It's like, who's texting me now?
Yeah, I'm digging a ditch. Stop.
Yeah. It's not. Do we really have to go there?
Hey man, gotta mention it every episode.
Okay, all right. King Menua. Listen, King Menua.
80 kilometers.
72.
80.
Oh wow, you looked it up, didn't you?
Yeah, we can argue that back and forth.
Fine. All right. Anyway, so interestingly enough, the site itself, besides the vision that St. Gregory had, sits on one of these vertex grid lines. And you can actually Google it or internet search it and say Earth's vertex or vortex grid lines, and you'll see a map of it. It's really interesting where some of the most prominent architecture that we have on Earth sits almost directly on some of these grid lines. It's insanely fascinating. So anyone who's out there who's curious, go check it out. And then go research and see what sits on these vortex lines. It's pretty nuts how these people had that kind of knowledge. This was also a sacred site for fire and water worship. So even people who had some sort of knowledge about this vortex line, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't think this is a coincidence. Knew that this particular site was something special, right? Lack for a better term.
Of course.
So this was a major move in the spreading of Christianity to even the neighboring peoples, such as the Caucasian Albanians, as we've mentioned in prior episodes, the Iberians, which were the Georgians, who also converted to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And apparently they're the ones who built all the churches in Artsakh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. According. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But we'll
cover that in another episode.
We digress.
Oh man. All right. So
now with all of this, you know, with the building of everything and the strengthening of Christianity, there was also a consequence to this, a major consequence, which was the struggle for religious freedom, because we were surrounded by enemies who were against what our civilization was doing.
It mostly was, you know, Muslim. Cultures.
Yeah. And again, you know, when we say this, we're not trying to be discriminatory towards anything. We're just stating facts.
It's history.
Yeah, it's history. We're not trying to be discriminatory towards anything.
We're not erasing history.
Yeah,
especially
we're not.
Our history.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So it was a problem with what the consequences were moving forward from this time forward. It turned into a major struggle for freedom, religious freedom.
Well, you know, that struggle of freedom, you know, the good old Persians were not too happy about the conversions going on in the region. It had caused a bit of a rift, to say the least, after the Arsacids converted to Christianity as well. This pretty much laid the groundwork leading up to the famous Battle of Avarayr of 451 AD. The Armenian army was led by none other than Vartan Mamikonyan, of course, you know, one of our sculptors, who was known as Red Vartan by his soldiers because of the red cape he wore during the charge on the battlefield. He was from the house of Mamikon, who were known for their warrior princes. According to the story, the Armenian army was about 66,000 deep or so, mostly foot soldiers, and the corps made of Armenian cavalry from the Nakharar regiments, who were facing an enemy army of reported 300,000 Persians who also had war elephants.
Insane.
I mean, have you seen war elephants?
Oh yeah. I mean, they were the ones who made it famous.
Yeah.
It was, I believe, historically speaking, the Persians and I believe the Huns, but that's like a different side of history. They didn't really deal with us. But if you know, like some of your Eastern European history, I think the Huns also employed war elephants. It's kind of nuts, man.
I know. I mean, as far as movies go, I think Alexander the Great with...
No, it was in the 300.
Was it in 300?
Yeah, it was in the 300.
You're right. It was in
it was
300.
in the 300.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Again, back to movies. Okay. So the battle lasted for a day and was really, really brutal. According to eyewitness historian Elisha, both sides battled without giving up an inch to one another, despite the heavy advantage to one side. The battlefield had mounds of corpses, horses, and elephants. During this battle, Vartan Mamikonyan and a great number of Armenian nobles and soldiers were martyred, basically. The Persians suffered a great deal of casualties as well.
Yeah, I mean, God, what an outnumbered situation.
I know.
66,000 to 300,000, right?
Yeah.
Well, according to some historical
And we're going to
writings.
cover an episode about Vartan Mamikonyan,
yeah.
obviously one of the pieces that is in production now. So
Yeah.
we'll go get into detail about his life and everything and that big battle that, you know.
The Battle of Avarayr was basically the Armenians, us, protecting our right to practice Christianity and continue practicing Christianity. This was one of the big reasons why the Persians attacked and wanted not necessarily to get rid of us, just to convert us back to Zoroastrianism.
Yeah.
You know, because the Persian Empire was pretty big. So anyway, after this battle, which lasted a day or so, and it was pretty brutal, as you mentioned, the Armenian forces retreated back into Greater Armenia, literally fought a sort of guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you think about guerrilla warfare, if people that aren't familiar with that term, is you're using your land that you're familiar with,
Of course.
to do surprise attacks.
Tactics that they're not aware of.
Completely tactical. Perfect word.
Oh, let me mention something. And this is something I think it was with Gevorg's episode.
Yes.
A lot of them, a lot of these, I guess you can call them the Nakharars that ended up escaping after the battle, ended up in Artsakh, and they were protected by the Artsakh seas.
Yes.
And
yes, they were.
And when the Persians came looking for them, they hid them, and just look how everything is tied together.
Oh, of course,
absolutely, it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's a conflicted area in history, in world history.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I mean, a coincidence. I mean, no, I don't want to use the word coincidence, but it's an area that we inhabited that happened to be smack dab in the middle of the Silk Road.
Yeah.
So everyone was trying to conquer and control this area, right? I mean, this is why. I mean, as we're going to
talk about bad luck, right?
I wouldn't say bad luck. This is just where we ended up.
Well, I mean, it is bad luck because those are our lands.
Yeah,
it's been our lands,
sure,
and because of where it is, everybody from the Turks to Persians to
everybody,
Romans,
Europeans, Africans,
everybody,
everyone wanted a piece of that land because it was. I mean, hence why the term the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Right. We've literally been inhabited an area that everybody wanted to control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of insane. So anyway, the Armenian forces retreated back, as I mentioned, and I think this might have had a lot to do with like the knowledge of the region and whatnot. And so the Persians later, having to deal with some of this guerrilla warfare, had to abandon their attempt to convert the Armenians back to more or less fire sun worshipping. Right now, again, Zoroastrianism wasn't limited to this, but it was the basis of the practice, according to doctrine. And the Armenians managed to stave off takeover. This pretty much was the start of a turbulent era for the next few centuries. And I'm sure we will cover this in future episodes. Sorry to be redundant. It's just a lot of information to cover. Of the Greeks and Romans who also tried to convert the Armenians to their practices of the time. In the times of these battles, the people of the region who helped the Armenians fight against the Persians also converted to Christianity. So it's kind of interesting. They had influence with the area, right?
Yeah.
And whoever helped them, for whatever reason, decided to convert to this faith.
Yeah.
It began to spread even further south, thanks to the Armenian missionaries, to as far south as Ethiopia.
Wow.
And if anybody knows, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somebody correct me, I might be wrong. Isn't it Armenians that took Christianity to Ethiopia?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, I hope I'm right about that.
No. There's writings about it.
Oh, no. Yeah. And as far north, here's where it gets really crazy. I actually had no idea about this. As far north as Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Iceland, for instance, which I've been to. Sorry, I'm bragging. Most scholars agree that Iceland converting to Christianity, and they are a very strong Christian nation. When I've been there, they had some massive cathedrals and churches. Was actually an Armenian missionary who became the first bishop of the country. Isn't that interesting?
It is. Actually, when we were researching and I read about this, I was like, wow. I mean,
it's an island.
Yeah.
Further north than the UK.
Yeah.
On the map.
Yeah.
How did that guy get there?
Well,
I mean, I know how he got there.
Yeah. Well,
but like, what made him think?
Yeah.
To get there.
Well, he was probably like, well, we got all this area covered. Let me see how far I can go.
Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's go to Iceland.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of ice.
Yeah. So,
right? Well, we'll be covering many of the characters we have mentioned in the coming episodes, as this is just an overview of Christianity being accepted and the impacts it had geopolitically and also culturally. So we won't touch on them too much for now. We'll leave the juicy details for upcoming episodes.
Yeah. Again, a lot of these characters have a lot more to them.
Of course. Now, from here we want to kind of cover the flourishing of the Armenian culture because of Christianity. So there's good,
Yes,
I guess eras and times that that came along. So
yeah, and so moving forward in some of the timelines here, we're moving into the 9th century, for instance, where the Bakradids or Bakraduni restored the kingdom of Armenia. This was pretty much the rebirth or renewal of the Armenian culture. Manuscripts were written, old ones were being reproduced, architecture began to boom. This included the famous city of Ani. Better known as the city of 1001 churches,
which we briefly covered with
Dr. Christina
Moranci.
Which was also known as the Bakraduni capital. During this time, the mother cathedral of Ani was built. Ani became one of the largest and busiest cities. Again, it sat on a strategic route, a trade route through the Silk Road.
Of course.
So it was I'm sure it had to be a massive cultural center. As we've discussed, it had to be a central hub for merchants, for anybody.
Well, they built them like that for a reason.
Of
it was
course they
to make sure that when travel was happening, it was going through these cities.
Absolutely.
So they knew what they were doing.
Growth was imminent.
Of course.
You planted a seed; it was just bound to grow, right?
Yeah.
So now we all know that every successful story in our history, as we're going to find out, seems to have I don't want to call it a sad ending, but a destructive ending for anything that we've ever built. And again, it's not just us. It's just our history. This is the way it's been. Has a destructive ending. And Ani was overrun by the Seljuks, a common foe that we all know about, who raided Armenian cities and towns, killing, burning, and pillaging anyone or anything that came across their violent path. Destructive in nature, we can safely say, if we know anything about the Seljuks.
Something people need to know about the Seljuks. They were Turkic peoples who conquered pretty much everything from the east, mostly for what is known as Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan area. They pretty much swept through the western areas of the region over a few centuries and built a vast empire that stretched as far as Anatolia. They were Turco-Persian Sunni Muslim empire. The thing about the Turkic culture in general, it seems everything is about destruction. Everything, it's about pillaging and I don't know. I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but
it's something that like we've known throughout history, and it's not just a Armenian centric thought. No.
It wasn't just about the Armenians. That comment is about them.
And I want to remind our listeners who are non-Armenian. I know I keep saying it, so I don't want people to think that this is a Armenian type of biased opinion about these people. But if you look throughout history, right, and anything that they've done, any of the Turkic people coming from the now modern day Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan area, and even as far east as Mongolia, Genghis Khan and whatnot, and his royal legacy, if you will, these people, all they did and the way they won their battles and the way they expanded their empire was literally the most brutal possible way of attack that you can possibly imagine. There was no diplomacy. There was no diplomacy whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was just run over everybody as hard as you could, right? And
no respect for our architecture.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Zero.
It was just to annihilate anything.
Absolutely.
There's I heard a saying where, again, it might be a little bit extreme, and I hope people don't take it the wrong way, but they say the Turkic culture or people, whatever one you say, they don't have history. They have a criminal record.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. If you look up a lot of famous historians, a lot of famous writers, I can't really mention anybody off the top of my head, but you can internet search this or Google search this or whatever the case is. Everyone at the time, throughout like the 11th, 12th, 15th, 16th centuries, 17th centuries, from the Seljuks to the Ottoman Empire. It was pretty much the same people.
Yeah.
They knew that this is the way these people dealt with their opposition.
Yeah.
You know, and it's I mean, it's interesting, but at the same time, you have to think to yourself that, again, we're not the only victims. It's not like they targeted us. They targeted everybody and anything in their way, in their path.
Yeah.
You know? So with a lot of the Seljuks pretty much pillaging and destroying everything in their path, right? Like locusts. The Armenians, obviously, and just like any other culture would, had to relocate or leave their current lands to maybe go establish something somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this is where we lead into Kilikian Armenia, or Cilician or Kilikia, pretty much, where I guess you could say East meets West.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, as far as well, in English they say Cilicia, Armenia. Yeah. As it's happened in the past with any culture, after the Seljuks pretty much destroyed anything in their sight, the Armenian refugees pretty much fled west to begin to settle in a region called Cilicia, which is modern-day southern Turkey and northern Syria, also known as Armenia Minor. Armenians began to have a significant presence in the area as they grew in numbers, occupying neighboring lands. Armenian aristocracy, like the Rubinians, who were direct descendants of the Bagratuni family, along with the Hetumians, were representative of the elites who were prominent in this area. Around 1080 AD, the Principality of Sicilian Armenia was established under their leadership. Less than 2 decades later, the First Crusades were happening. Cilicia and Anatolia played a very crucial role for the Crusaders, as we will find out. They were united by the Rubinians.
Yeah, the Armenians contributed greatly to the cause of the Crusades. Now, if anybody knows their history about the Holy Wars or the Crusades, right? They lasted for hundreds of years. They lasted, I believe, from like the late 11th century to almost the 14th century, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, Pope Gregory VIII would state, and I quote, "No nation came more generously to the aid of the Crusaders than the Armenians, who gave food, men, and arms." Now, something interesting during this time with the Crusades, the Armenians seemed to have been a pit stop of sorts for both sides. It was almost like they were playing both sides. Like they were also aiding the Islamic side to an extent, not as much as the, I guess, call it the Christian side. Right? Again, the Holy Wars are such a deep topic. It's almost mind-blowing how intricate this whole story is. I remember, doing a lot of reading about this long time ago, and it's almost it almost gets you confused. Like you don't understand the politics of it, the diplomacy and the non-diplomacy and whatnot. It's just it's really crazy. But anyway, the Crusaders were tired and beaten down from constant attacks, illnesses, and starvation throughout their journey from Europe. And they were welcomed and helped quite often by the Armenians. The Crusaders endured a lot of hate in Constantinople, or Constantinopolis, modern day Istanbul. So the treatment was welcoming from the Armenians. I mean, obviously, if you're that battled and bruised and suffering, anybody who gives you any sort of preferential treatment or any good treatment is welcoming, right?
Of course.
After a series of unions, this is where it gets a little political, through marriages and whatnot, the Armenians and the Franks, who were basically the French people, we know, right? The Crusaders grew close to the Armenians and many knights' orders of the time, most notably the notorious Knights Templar, as we have probably all heard in some sort of historical narrative, were welcomed and had their branches in Kilikia or Cilicia. Powerful and influential Venetian and Genoese traders, merchants were handling major operations such as manufacturing of weapons,
which was
right?
a specialty. You know?
Yeah, of course. And the funny thing is, like, the Armenian engineers, they used they employed a lot of Armenian engineers to build, I guess, weapons.
Especially metalwork, you know, Darchinyan.
Of course,
you know,
absolutely.
That's where that last name comes from. So,
So they would. So a lot of the Armenian engineers were employed to build siege weapons. Siege weapons, as in like these big weapons that, again, movie reference. You know, like anything that looks like they're gonna be able to breach walls, thick, big, tall walls for a particular city, right?
Yeah.
So the Crusaders used this to break through a lot of fortified walls during their conquests.
Of course, yeah. Well, in 1185, Sicilian Prince Levon the Magnificent came to power. He was an honorary Teutonic knight. We mentioned that the knights' orders were prominent due to the hospitality they received, right? He was a great leader and a wise ruler and a warrior king. He led during victories against the Turkish in this era. Under his leadership, the Armenians won many battles and Armenian civilization prospered, basically. He and his troops took part in the siege of Acre, which we touched on ancient city in the last episode, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
And also assisted the English Crusaders in the conquest of Cyprus in 1191. So this time period was known as the Silver Age of Armenia. There are actually so many amazing manuscripts that were made and preserved in Yerevan's Institute of Depository of Ancient Manuscripts of the Mesrop Mashdor's Matenadaran.
Yeah. I've been there one time.
Yeah. I've been there when I was still living as a child in Armenia. I was like 8 years old.
Yeah, if you go to Yerevan, if anybody goes to Yerevan, that's like one of the stanchion places you visit. You have to go to the Matenadaran. That's like, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing some of the stuff that they have there.
Again, for me, it was such a long time ago, but my mom took me to so many places before we migrated to America, and I still have those memories. I was 8 years old, but still, like, I still remember.
It's pretty amazing when sometimes I had the luxury, I guess, call it that, of having a curator kind of lead us through the museum. And when they kind of talk about some of the brief facts of the artifacts that they have, when they start mentioning 700 years old, 800 years old, 900 years old, you're like, wait, are you kidding me? This can't be real. Like, it's insane. The fact that, like, you're looking at something that's like 2 feet away from your face, that's 9 centuries old, 10 centuries old.
It's hard to take it in and just do the math. Yeah.
Anyway, so Levon established, Levon Arachin, or the first, established educational centers, castles, and churches. These buildings, architectural style was actually adopted by the Crusaders.
Yeah.
Again, the influence of Armenian culture, civilization during this time was impacting certain areas of Europe when these Crusaders were going back and forth during these conquests.
And the thing is, if we go back to episode 1 and what Ron was talking about, there is a footprint of Armenian history almost in every culture, especially in Europe. It's unbelievable.
And I had no idea. I'm going to be honest with you. I had no clue. I didn't. As much as I love history, I really didn't understand
and once somebody
comprehend the footprint of what our culture has impacted around the globe in certain
and that's
areas.
The whole thing when we talk about, when they say Armenia, especially Armenian highlands, gave birth to civilization. This is what we're talking about, that throughout thousands of years, our footprint is in so many cultures because of us helping architecturally, metalwork, even
woodwork,
woodworking, winery, ale, all this stuff.
Yeah,
like
these practices were passed along,
of course,
and spawned somewhere. So a lot of these buildings and architectural styles that were adopted by the Crusaders included one of our most famous, as every Armenian would know, are churches that have the conical domes.
Of course,
right? And you see this in certain architectures in France, even as far north as Ireland. I know it's not a part of our research, but I know for a fact myself, if you look at any of these old churches or monasteries or whatever the case is, you see conical, and it turns out that our influence was the reason for this, and it's super interesting. As you can see, it was just so far spread in Europe. Levon was crowned king in 1198 by the Catholicus of all Armenians at the time, Gregory VII, not the same Gregory, because we've moved forward in timeline. Levon was crowned in the presence of the Holy Roman Empire and Byzantine officials. That's how prominent this was.
Yeah, that's big.
That's absolutely. Big, but again, at the time, the Roman papacy or the Catholic papacy had a lot of involvement with who was crowned who and what and whatnot, right? So when he was crowned king, he was given the name the Magnificent, or Metzagorz, for his great deeds for the people of Kilikia or Cilicia. The kingdom prospered and staved off multiple attacks and invasions for nearly 200 years. The kingdom of Kilikia eventually fell to the Mamluks, who were slave soldiers, I guess, who were basically of Turkish or Turkic origin. Yeah, those guys again.
But
right?
One thing I want to mention, when we talk about these years, when you throw a number like 200 years, you have to kind of take it in and understand 200 years. If where the time we live in, think about it. If you look at World War I, World War II, it's not even 100 years ago.
It's more or less like 3 generations, 4 generations. Yeah.
So it is a long time to be, prosperous and achieve all this stuff. So
and to your point, to add to your point, they were displaced because of the Seljuks. They moved to another area and established themselves in another area. And they managed to develop this over a 200-year span and became a prominent kingdom.
Yeah.
In an area that wasn't really that related to Greater Armenia.
To add to that, not to tweet our own horn as Armenians, but it's something about our culture. Wherever we go, it doesn't matter in the world. we have the saying. We build our own new Armenia or new whatever it is. It doesn't matter. There's something about our culture, about creativity, about architecture, building. So that, the famous
cultural impact.
William Saroyan saying, if I don't remember the exact saying, but it's basically, if take 2 Armenians and put them anywhere in the world, watch them build a new Armenia.
Yeah, it's true.
Kind of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Yeah.
So again, in 1373, Levon VI, whose reign was pretty short-lived, from 1373 to 1375, only 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Was destined to be the last king of the Cilician or Kilikian Armenia.
Yeah.
The Mamluks launched massive attacks on an already exhausted Armenia. After 9 months of battle, the capital of Sis fell. King Levon and Queen Marguerite, along with many of the aristocracy, were taken prisoner to Cairo, the Mamluk capital. After 7 years in captivity, King Levon VI and his family were freed after the Spanish King of Aragon and Castile paid a pretty hefty ransom, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Well, we like the Spanish.
Of course we like the Spanish.
It was like an awesome bailout, right?
Of course, yeah, you can say that. Yeah. But well, here's the thing: Levon VI, after being freed, actually traveled to France, where he was welcomed as a friend and played an integral role to mediate peace between the French and the English during the time of the 100 Years' War that they had. I mean, we all know about that. Well, I don't think everybody knows about it.
It's a famous war. It's a famous war that like it's pretty prominent in history books and whatnot. Right?
Levon VI passed away in Paris in 1393 and was known as the last monarch of the Cilician or Cilician Kingdom. Apparently, after the help he gave to help mediate between the two warring sides, which is between the English and the French, he wanted the help of the Crusaders to get Cilicia back in a way. Well, not in a way. He wanted to get it back, so it was like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Absolutely.
But the request for help, unfortunately, there was no favor in return.
Yeah. So during some of the research that I know both of us have done, I came across so many instances where, let's say, and again, I'm not trying to victimize our people or our kings and queens and whatnot, but I came across a lot of information where, and again, in future episodes, we'll talk about this, where they seemed like they wanted to help somebody. They wanted to mediate in this instance, they wanted to, help two sides come together or stop battling or whatever the case is. And sure, let's be honest, they expected a favor back.
Of course.
Right? Like you said, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And they were kind of screwed. It's, whoever these people were, in this instance, the French and the English got what they wanted and then said, whatever, we're not going to deal with whatever that your requests are.
Well, that's just unfortunately.
And it's not just during this time era. It's even so moving forward. Yeah, absolutely.
It's happened so many times. And unfortunately, it's always been in our history, and not to get political, but we always, they come to us for help, and if you know anything about Armenian culture, we are the most hospitable culture in the world. We will open our door to you, feed you.
First thing you get is
drink with you, and have you stay at our place, and just we're all about that. And unfortunately, time and time again.
Cup of coffee and a conversation.
We are always taken advantage of, but anyways, so let's talk about the Armenia being almost reborn in a way.
More in like the modern era, I suppose. Well, not modern, but over the last few hundred years.
So during the 15th century, Armenia once again conquered and plundered by nomadic tribes, Turkic tribes, and that came from Central Asia. No surprise there.
Yeah, nope.
Armenian villages, towns, and cities were laid in waste. This eventually led to the tyrannical rule of the Ottoman Turks. The Ottomans, who fought for control of Armenia against the Safavid and Qajar dynasty of Persia, didn't bode well for the Armenian population at all.
Nope, it didn't. I mean, it never bodes well when you have any of these Turkic tribes involved, right?
Of course. This had to be like devastating. It even sounds draining with how much we've been controlled. It's just it's always been run over by Islamic control.
Yeah, and again, we had mentioned at the beginning of this episode that Christianity served its good and served its bad.
Yeah. And this is the bad.
Yeah, and you have your pros and cons. I mean, look, we've gone through how many centuries in this short span.
Yeah.
Just kind of an overview. Everybody wanted to conquer us and run over us.
Yep.
Right. Like, and this is mostly after the Roman Empire collapse. So we're stuck in the middle of what? From the south, from the east, right?
From the west,
Muslims. And again, I'm not discriminating against Muslims. This is not what I'm talking about. It's just non-stop wave after wave after wave of attacks, conquering, of displacement, of people moving east, west, it doesn't make a difference. It's just somebody always managed to, hey, let's get rid of these Christian people. Like,
but
what's
you know
going on?
what? But you know what? We're still here.
We survived.
Still here.
Yeah, we survived. And so, it's like, I guess it's not a matter of like us being reborn. We've just maintained some way, somehow. We've maintained, we've survived,
and we'll continue to survive.
Absolutely, we will. In 1604, Persian Shah Abbas I decided to relocate Armenians, as we were just talking about, to Persia and make a wasteland of eastern Armenia to stop the advance of Turkish armies. Interesting strategy. Not too happy about it, but I guess
that's where the large Persian Armenian community comes from, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Armenian population had scattered and dwindled, unfortunately, at the time. Eventually, the Turks and the Persians decided to divide Armenia, leaving Western Armenia and Kilikia, Cilicia, to the Turks, which, with the Persians retaining Eastern Armenia. Many massacres ensued through the Western region at the hands of the Turks over centuries of control. Moving forward into the 19th century, again, we're just kind of skipping forward with the impacts of Christianity, right? While Kilikia, or Cilicia, and Western Armenia were in Turkish hands, Eastern Armenia was liberated by the Russians. That was a topic that we discussed with Gevorg Nazarian with the Artsakh episode, right?
Of course.
In the 19th century and what the Russians had done for the Armenians. So the Turks continued their fierce anti-Armenian and most importantly, anti-Christian policies, and labeled them as infidels, along with the Greeks and Syrians. So it wasn't just the Armenians that they had problems with, right? Yeah. So,
well, pretty much anyone Christian in that region, which was the Greeks, Armenians, and Assyrians, were infidels.
So in essence, we share common enemies. It seems. In the 1860s, 1870s, many of the Armenians who were considered second-class citizens rose up against the tyranny, right?
Yeah.
Talk about a revolt. The Armenians from Zeytun and Sasun rose up to defend their freedom. The Ottomans launched a series of pogroms and massacres. In this time frame...
Before you continue, this is a very important point that, before the Armenian genocide, there were so many more genocides before that in the late 1800s.
Well, this was basically the tipping point of what led to.
Of course,
and we're going to get there in a second.
Yeah,
very quickly. Yeah, this is what started everything that led up to the genocide, right? Yeah. Like these revolts from Zeytun and Sasun are what started to brew everything moving forward for the next 40 or 50 years,
which was the Armenian question.
Absolutely. And so after these pogroms and massacres, this was gaining a lot of attention throughout the European community, and many human rights advocates were demanding that European governments get involved and punish the Turkish government or the Ottomans. The Armenian people living under this tyranny, all of this led to the Berlin Conference of 1878. Yeah. Now, while nothing was really determined to clear up or solve the problem, and I'm gonna kind of
the Armenian question.
I'm gonna I guess I want to say I'm gonna but the sheshtemeti. Yeah. Okay. The situation was referred to as the Armenian question, and I quote, which focused on getting rid of the discrimination and oppression of the Armenians under Turkish rule. This didn't really solve anything.
No.
It really didn't. All these events during the 19th century led to the Armenian genocide, which was led by Talat Pasha and the Young Turks, a dark topic we are all too familiar with, and I'm sure we all know too much about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So... for now, this concludes the information that involved 301 AD. Yes, we covered about 1700 years of information, right?
Yeah.
Briefly.
Yeah, we kind of covered, Christianity up and down pretty much,
But here is the important part of all of this. Now, not that I'm saying I'm not happy that they didn't accept Christianity, right? But they accepted Christianity, and this is something that we didn't talk about in this episode, and I'm sure one day we'll get into, is almost under pressure because of everything that was going on in their region from almost all sides. And Emperor Constantine at the time, was a crazy human being, just like every single Caesar that ever existed.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by anything that they've ever glorified. And this is not an opinion. If you do your historical research,
you have to be crazy to want to become Caesar.
But there have been good kings. We talked about Tigran the Great, right? He was a diplomat in essence. He wasn't just like, hey, let me go kill everybody and make them obey me, right? Yes, there were instances, I'm sure, but when you think about any of the Roman emperors, and I'm not trying to paint the Roman Empire as like some evil entity, although I do have my opinions about this personally, a lot of their emperors were absolute psychopaths. They were sociopaths, narcissists, and psychopaths. They really were.
Well, I mean, throughout history, and that's what it takes to be an emperor.
Sure, but I'm sure this is what they had to do to gain respect and whatever. But Emperor Constantine was actually a nut job as well. I mean, I know last episode, or was it the previous episode, we talked about Emperor Nero. He was a nut job.
Yep.
They were all crazy. So Lord knows what type of influence he had to press the Armenians at the time, who were almost like a buffer between what they were trying to conquer in the east, right?
Yeah.
And what they were trying to do in the region.
Yeah.
We accepted Christianity through the spreading of gospels and whatnot, right? There was multiple influences. It was just it wasn't just one person, but the fact that we accepted it in a very volatile region, surrounded by Islam, conquered by Islam, and on the Silk Road, more or less, basically led to 17 to 18, now 1800 years of absolute persecution and treachery and running over and whatnot. And again, I'm not trying to paint a bad picture of where our faith is, but
my opinion. I think even if, like you said, it was a very bold move from our king to just, I mean, that's just like almost sweeping the rug underneath an entire country, saying, okay, you know what, now we're Christians and everybody's going to be believing in this form of religion, and almost like a mandate.
Sure. Yeah.
So and it's, I think eventually it would have happened slowly,
maybe,
but we don't really know the details. We got to do research on that. But yeah, my personal feeling is this is not towards Christianity. We're all Christians. We all practice Christianity in some form. We have our beliefs, but I really think that there were some other forces involved to do this because they saw what was coming. In my opinion, they kind of foresaw their Turkic tribes, and again, this is all speculation, but in my opinion, I think at that time it was the wrong move.
Possibly. I mean, when you look at it in hindsight, with everything that we are going to cover and we have covered, it looks like it led to so many problems.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, but again, when your faith is strong, I mean, you can't challenge religion, right? Like,
listen,
know that.
faith is faith, but you're talking about destruction of an entire culture for 1800 years, so it's listen, nobody, governments make decisions. Our current government makes decisions. We will see the results in years to come. So it's the same kind of concept. So again, I don't know. I don't want to dive into this too deep.
Yeah, neither do I. But here's an interesting question. And again, this question doesn't come from a defensive standpoint with Christianity. Is what if, just something to think about, because I don't have the answer. I certainly don't, because that's not the way history went. What if we never converted to Christianity? We stayed Mithraists, or we converted to Zoroastrianism. Did that mean that we would be held in like some sort of protection with the Persians? Would that mean, because there was always the Islams, right? Or the Muslims, I'm sorry. We were just, honestly, it just seems like strategically we were based in a really volatile region. It didn't matter, in my opinion. I don't think it really mattered.
I personally think we would have probably ended up being almost like brother nation to Iran, Persia, versus more of the Turkic states that exist now, because there's always been that relationship between Armenia till this day. We've always had, in history there's been wars and this and that,
but we have good relations with Iran
so
now.
I think we would have been, in a way, I think we would have been our own country and kind of been like almost like sister and brother, type of countries if we hadn't converted. But you never know. Maybe later on some other king might have come along and converted. So we don't know. But this is what happened. And
and again, ladies and gentlemen, we're not trying to be too opinionated and offensive towards the Christian faith. I myself am a Christian. I won't say anything negative about it, but it's just interesting to think about and ponder. It really is, because where would we have gone if we didn't, and where did we go when we did?
Well, we'll never know, I guess.
No, we won't. But it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Well,
anyway,
that was pretty much the topic for today, and for this episode, I should say. There's a lot of topics from this,
a lot of characters
that we're going to be covering.
Characters.
Yeah, we're going to be covering in the near future. So,
and events.
And events. I do want to mention again, go ahead, just to let you guys know, Tigran the Great sculptures are shipping now. So if you had pre-ordered, then it's on its way. If you haven't ordered yet, there's limited amount left. So go ahead and go to merherosner.com and order the sculpture of Tigran the Great. There's also Vartan Mamikonyan, which we talked about earlier in this episode. And those are going to be in production, I think, next week. The Vartan's in. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, well, it's starting next week. So our goal is to get those out to all the pre-orders that have come in mid-October or so, somewhere around there. And obviously we announced on the episode. So when this is available to listen, make sure you go to our Instagram page, which will be at Mer Herosner, and to see Queen Ashrae sculpture, which will be available for pre-order. Besides that, I also want to mention, obviously, again, about miasin.org and the Popok animation project that we're doing with them, which is starting a animation 3D 3D animation, anything that has to do with 3D world in the city of Gyumri in Armenia for children to basically learn how to do this for free. So visit miasin.org/Popok animation and donate any amount to help this project. From the original funding that we did, everything's moving along. The computers, I think, have been purchased already. The office space, or the space that's being used, has been rented, and they, I think, have over I don't know if I'm correct on this, but I think Alvan was telling me that they have plenty of kids already registered to start the classes.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, please support.
What Popok Animations is doing, guys. They're really doing cool stuff. Check them out. Support them. Give them a follow. They're doing amazing things. They're trying to bring in big projects from some of the more prominent nations, in terms of like movie work and animation work. So,
yeah. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, let everybody know about the Mer Herosner podcast. We appreciate all the feedback. And Mike, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for keeping on listening to us.
Yeah.
Because we're two knuckleheads that are trying to get smarter.
Yeah. And by the way, we're learning because of you guys, because of everything that we're doing here. And, we have learned so much, all this research that we do. We're thankful. This is what pushes us to do this and learn. I mean, both of us being history buffs, we've read a lot, but this research, it's like, it's unbelievable. So
I'm going to sleep on my smart pillow tonight.
Yeah. You have a smart pillow.
I do.
Yeah, I got to get one of those. Yeah. Especially with some words that I stumble upon. But everybody stay safe, be healthy. Again, thank you. And until the next episode, take care.